Hi, everyone.
Cool.
Welcome to Refreshed, a show where we highlight the wonderful people work and ideas on the internet. Today, I am joined by Kelsey Lewin, friend of the show, co-owner of the marvelous store Pink Gorilla, and co-director of the Video Games History Foundation. Everyone, welcome Kelsey. Woo!
Thank you.
It's hard because it's just you and me here. It's not like a group like with Deepest Dive, so we don't have, like a group clap.
That's okay. Chat will clap for us.
Yeah, chat, please clap. And just a reminder, if you're in chat and you want to ask a question, please bold it so that it sort of like sticks out and we can see it. Oh, look, there we go. Okay, so we have some claps in the chat. So today you are joining me to talk about something that's very, very fun. And like not, it's fun because it's like a different angle, but still very, video games adjacent, more so than say the K-pop or the animation episode we had last week. So we are here today to talk about online Pokemon communities. Woo!
Yeah.
So Kelsey, who is your favorite Pokemon? Start. I'm gonna put you on the spot here.
I love answering. No, that's okay. I love answering this because it's stupid. My favorite Pokemon is Pidgey.
Okay.
Which is no one's favorite Pokemon.
Okay, but you have birds. You love birds.
So growing up, my favorite Pokemon was Pidgeot,
okay.
And then as I got older, I realized I really just like baby. They don't make Pidgeot plushies. They barely make Pidgey anything, but now I wish you got your Pikachu in the background. I really wish I had all my Pokemon plushies around me, but they did make a really fat Pidgey plushie in Japan that I imported, and It's fantastic. But yeah, overall, I'm just really into bird Pokemon, and actually in this last game in Sword and Shield, it's the Pokemon games are like the story mode and everything's fairly easy if you've been playing Pokemon your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to make challenges for myself, and my challenge this generation was make a 100% bird team.
Amazing.
And beat the game with only bird Pokemon. So not necessarily flying types, but Pokemon that are birds. I could have I had Surfetch'd, which is fighting type, and there's a few things, little tricks I could have to make it not like just die immediately to some.
So who was the bird? Which bird were you relying on the most? Who was like the old faithful?
Surfetch'd, for sure.
Okay.
Because everyone else was. I think I also had a Golduck, but yeah, it was pretty much it was a mostly flying type team, which is weak to a lot of stuff. So yeah, I relied on Surfetch'd to kind of like round out everything else.
Okay, so now I feel like I have to show. So I'm like completely surrounded by my Pokemon plushies right now. And so I have to show the chat. I'm sorry, this is like a miniature desk tour. This is the Backstage Pass, which is the new $10 tier on Patreon, if you haven't heard. Okay, so here we have my Kip. Here we have Pikachu number 1. I got this Pikachu when I was 5 years old, and brought it to preschool with me. Here I have Lucario, who's wearing a little necklace. I have another Pikachu right here, the Pokédoll Pikachu. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, we're almost done. There's Squirtle, who I won at the Minnesota State Fair. I have to reference Minnesota. That's part of my contract. And then last but not least, I have Grookey inside of a Pikachu mug.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
It is. Yeah, it's horrifying.
Severed heads stacked on top of each other.
And it's horrible because all these plushies clutter my desk so much. And it's only going to continue to grow. But I kind of cleared them.
Oh, yeah. No, that's nothing.
Yeah.
That's a desk full is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
It's when it starts taking over the whole room.
It's
maybe a problem.
Which honestly, we might be getting to that point. Okay, so sorry to indulge myself in all my Pokemon plushies. We're not.
Wait, which is your favorite Pokemon?
You know what? Okay, so Ben asked me this on Min Facts, and I said Frostlass, which is not true. I like Frostlass a lot.
Good answer, though.
Yeah, right? Like, I live in Minnesota. If, you know, like, Pokemon were real, I know that I would have a Frostlass on my team. And it's a cool design, kind of spooky. But I think, like, Latias is my favorite. Yeah, always been a fan. Even though the movie absolutely wrecked me as a child. My mom would be like, do you want to cry again? Like, as a kid, I'm watching it. It's like, she's like, why? Like,
I heard all those Pokemon movies so, like, they hit really hard emotionally.
Well, and even I was thinking about, so I was like prepping research for today's show and, you know, like going through Cerebi, and of course, like their mascot is Celebi, who is like the most adorable Pokemon ever. But like, I think I just have sad feelings around Celebi because it's right. Pokemon Forever is that movie. And it just is also very sad because it's about like climate catastrophe. And Celebi dies because they're killing the forest. And I just have really sad memories of Celebi. I'm like, ooh, Dark Omen. Do you have a favorite Pokemon anime movie?
Oh, I don't know. I think my favorite is still the first one. But I haven't.
Did you watch the Netflix remake of it?
Is that the one with the like updated animation and everything? I just saw the trailers for it. It looked it's like Uncanny Valley. It's weird.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's good. Like that's one of those things where it becomes very difficult when you have such strong memories associated with something to like actually step back and look at it objectively. So I almost feel like I shouldn't have an opinion on it because your opinion shouldn't just be like, well, it's not my childhood, therefore, like it's probably very good.
Did you cry watching the first movie? Yeah, I did.
Of course.
I was like, I had the flu when it came out, so I was like, hell yeah, this is what we're doing today. Is rewatching this, trying to have some comfort. They actually changed a bit of the plot too, or like they took some small parts out as well, like very minimal, but yeah.
There's a good Minnesota joke in that movie, though.
Wait,
they keep that in?
What's that?
When Team Rocket is rowing in the storm or whatever, they said something. They made a joke about the Minnesota Vikings, and I forget exactly what it was. But they were Vikings, and they said like, I haven't seen Vikings since Minnesota or something like that. But it was always really weird to me. So I was like, wait, Minnesota exists in the Pokemon world? What?
Yeah. Well, there's always... Okay, I remember being... This is so off track. But I remember being like a kid and looking at a TCG art of a weeping bell. And there's a bird in the tree with the weeping bell. And I was like, wait, what is happening? Like, how does this work? Do you think there are animals in the Pokemon world?
There have to be, but yeah, no. If you start like getting into the weeds too much with Pokemon and how it works, it starts getting really weird because it's like, okay, is every plant alive? Like, what do you eat? Are you always killing and eating Pokemon? Because then they do reference eating Pokemon.
Yeah, like Taurus.
Like, which ones are okay to eat?
Yeah,
and which ones? Some of these Pokemon are like straight up humans. Like, how come there are Machamps employed as, like, movers? That seems strange. Why is there a Mr. Mime living in this house, like a butler? This is, yeah. You're not supposed to think that hard about it. It starts getting really weird.
No. And I would say, like, Nintendo in general, like, flip-flops on its canon a lot. Like, we just found out that Mario and Luigi are Japanese. And so, we're all still processing that.
We found out they're Japanese?
Yeah. Okay, so there is an interview.
They're not Italian?
Yeah, they're not Italian. I can send you the interview, but this was like recently talked about, and I'm sure Nintendo was upset that this developer said this. But yeah, he was like, yeah, no, like,
I can't take anyone seriously. I know, like it's never meant to have a real canon. I think because it just gets too complicated.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like these franchises are so big, like, there's no way to be consistent between the spin-offs and, like the main games. And the anime and the movies, blah, 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 you know. So, transitioning into like the larger conversation. So we played a fun little game before we started the show, and I asked like how many Pokemon there are, and I got all that information from Bulbapedia and Cerebi, which is what we're here to talk about today. So this will just like be a casual conversation. Kelsey, sort of like, what was your experience with some of these websites? And if there's one in particular that you want to talk about, like, feel free to start there and like can sort of build off of that.
Yeah, I mean, the first one that I started using really hardcore all the time was Cerebi, because it just is kind of this, if you're not familiar with Cerebi, it's basically just this giant information resource for all things Pokemon. But when you're playing the game, what's really useful about it is that it just has all of the information about every Pokemon in each game, because things will change. Like it'll, certain moves they can learn, or even sometimes like, their evolution path and stuff. I mean, they add new evolutions and baby forms and that sort of thing to Pokemon all the time. So you'll get, it's basically just like a really, rather than having a walkthrough, you can just kind of look up resources on individual Pokemon to sort of help you out. So is this Pokemon worth having on my team if it's not going to evolve until level 36 or whatever? Or should I make sure it doesn't evolve yet so that it can learn this other move sooner? I mean, it really just became like the resource I used as I was going through the game. When I didn't have a guidebook, and even sometimes when I did have a guidebook. I don't think anyone has guidebooks anymore. Yeah,
well, which is unfortunate because I think guidebooks are really fun, but I'm definitely in a similar place where like I was pretty young when I started playing games, and once I learned how to read, I definitely like started like going to websites to figure out how to do things, because sometimes the gameplay, like the design of the game isn't super clear, and like how to do certain things aren't super clear. And so like I feel like Cerebi really filled a lot of those gaps. And like what you're saying about how, you know, like there are changes all the time. What's wild about Cerebi is like it felt like, I don't know if this is true back then, it felt like it was updated every day. I mean, the entries, I think, like there was a Pokemon of the day. So they're definitely on the webpage every day. Dan Do Stuff said Joe Merrick is a damn hero. And that is true. I don't know if Joe's the only person behind Cerebi, but like, it's just wild. Like, it's like the Pokédex of Pokédexes. And I think that's part of the reason why it folded so well. Like the Pokemon community embraced it so much, is like Pokemon is kind of inherently about like collecting information. And so then this website is just like doing that, right? And so it's like there's the attack decks, and there's the Pokemon of the day, and there are the guides, and there's like the fan art. Like it literally had like all these aspects to it. So did you like have a specific game that you started using Cerebi with? Do you remember?
I can't remember. It was probably around Gen 3, which I'm trying to like make sure my timeline makes sense. But I think Cerebi recently turned 20.
Yeah, it did.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was founded in 1999, which is wild. Like,
which is incredible. I mean, I had guidebooks for Gen 1 and Gen 2, and also, you know, I was younger. It's not that I didn't know what the internet was, but I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I think there's like a period of time when you're a kid, and maybe this isn't true anymore for kids nowadays. You know, we're both millennials, so take with that what you will. But there was like a time before I realized that I could use the internet for like very specific things. Like if there was something missing from my guidebook, that I could then go to the internet to try to figure it out. They were like they existed in very separate worlds for me for a little while. And then when I eventually figured out that like, oh, if there's a gap in the book I have, the internet might have the answer. And, you know, whatever year that was that I kind of started putting those pieces together was when I really, when I discovered Cerebi, and that sort of just became my Bible for Pokemon games moving forward. And also for like the news. I mean, you know, I read some game magazines and stuff growing up, but for Pokemon specific news, whether it was like there's a competition coming to these malls, or there's you know, a game coming out here and there's going to be a demo at this mall or whatever. I mean, that was where I got all of that news. And so I was able to attend some of those events that I would have never heard about otherwise if it wasn't for like the news tabs on these community sites.
Yeah. Well, I remember growing up too and being like, okay, Toys R Us is going to have exclusive Pokemon. Like if you come during, you know, like this week, and I would have had no idea. Like, and I just straight up wouldn't have been able to fill my Pokedexes if it weren't for like resources like Cerebi. And it's just like, I mean, it's wild because like, I feel like they were fulfilling like a need in the community, like even before Pokemon Company was. Cause like, I remember going to like the Pokemon.com website first and it, you know, like I literally remember the loading screen, the Pokeball spinning, and it's just like this old website and it's, you know, takes like 10 minutes to load it and they have their Pokedex or whatever, but it's like, oh, only this generation, or, you know, like missing X information on like how to actually get them, you know, cause it wouldn't have like the routes of where you can find them or like the weird oddities, like, yeah.
It almost felt more like a companion to like the anime a lot of times than to the games. Just in that, it would just give you kind of like general information about Pokemon and not like strategic information about it. And so, I mean, I went to that website, but mostly for like the wallpapers and the printout colors. So,
well, and I think the only time I really regularly used the Pokemon website or like a Pokemon official website was like Pokemon Dreams, where you could load your Pokemon onto your web browser. I think this was Diamond and Pearl era. Honestly, I should go back and like dig into this more. But like you could, it was like Neopets, except Pokemon like on a browser. Did you ever play that?
I have like really vague memories of that. I remember that was a DS game, but I can't remember which one of the DS
I'm trying to think
that was.
Yeah, or maybe it was. Oh, do you know what? I think it was Pokemon Black and White. Wow, I'm gonna lose.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm gonna lose.
Okay.
Oh
well,
no.
Okay, that's the thing when you have this many generations of Pokemon, and when you've been a part of it for so long, is that they do end up just
like blending.
Yeah.
Well, and it's still funny because, like, even then, I still remember, like, going to Cerebi to be like, hey, okay, to get this specific skin for your DS, like, go into, like, the Dreams thing, launch the thing, do this activity, use this berry. And it's kind of like, it does make me wonder, like, do you think the Pokemon game makers get used to having like companions like Cerebi? Does that influence the way they make games? Because like I'm just thinking about like how to get Pokemon like Regirock, Registeel, and Regice that are literally like written in Braille with like very specific conditions to spawn them, and I would have never figured it out if it weren't for like resources like Cerebi.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's I mean, I think it's either that or they anticipate, or their intention is that for these things to be like intentionally really difficult and like most people to not discover or have them. And in the age of the internet, that's just kind of not a thing. But I think back to like, you know, in the 90s and stuff when you'd have like secret summons you could get in the Final Fantasy games and that sort of thing, where if you're just, you know, one of your friends at school might have figured it out, but otherwise you like can go the whole game without even knowing it exists. And so I wonder if it's, you know, if they designed it to be closer to something like that, or if it is, like they want you to find it, but only if you're kind of in tune, if you're like in the know and on these sites, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's like, I guess it is fun to have the challenge. Like I kind of wish that was still, you know, like more of a part of it, because now everything seems pretty straightforward, or I am so savvy with these websites. Nothing feels sort of like discovery like anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Bob Backwards asks, have there been any Pokemon rumors / urban legends that you all believed back in the day that was most likely disproven by one of these websites?
Oh gosh, a ton.
Yeah.
There's been some really good work done by some of these communities like the Silk Road and stuff in sort of like you know, digging into the data of these games and really like proving out where, I mean, first of all, some of it's like where these rumors come from in the first place. And then also just straight up disproving a bunch of them. I mean, obviously the big one that everyone had was like the Mew under the truck, and then things like the Pokegods, Mew 3, that sort of thing. Like, these were all really, really common ones back in the day. Because people, you could post a screenshot online that was doctored, and like how it wasn't an age where like everyone in the world understood Photoshop, and these things were a lot more believable. And even sometimes, I'm trying to remember exactly which one this was, but there was something in one of the manuals, if not one of the guidebooks, that was like a Professor Oak tip, and it was just like complete bullshit. Like, it was just a complete lie that spawned a bunch of rumors, and I can't for the life of me remember what that was. But yeah, a lot of these rumors, I think, were disproved sort of later by these sites, but also a lot of them spawned from these sites and were propagated by these sites in the first place. So it's kind of a mix of both. Yeah.
Well, and it is interesting, though, like, a lot of these sites, like, I think about Cerebi, and like Joe isn't whatever, a standard journalist or, whatever you'd like to say or like call that. But at the same time, like, these, like, the people behind these websites have such an intimate knowledge of like how this specific company and franchise works that, like, even today, there was like a misunderstanding about dates for how long a Pokemon Go event would run, because like the American Pokemon Go communication said one date and the Japanese said another. And then people were like, oh, there's like a mistake made. And they're like, no, there's not a mistake. It's just like every time we see a difference between the two, like this happens, we always pick the Japanese one because that's the one that ends up being correct. And so like they like develop, like this really intimate, knowledge of like how to even like think about these things because they've been operating for 20 years covering the same exact company, Right. Let's see here. I am Leafeon says, I remember I absolutely did not believe the Drifloon stuff when I was younger, like even how to catch them. But lo and behold, lol. Do you know what's up with Drifloon? Is there like a specific way to catch them?
With Drifloon? There's the one that always that I know did that for a lot of people is like the Inkay one. To evolve it, we had to turn your DS upside down.
Oh, yeah. Wait, and then there's the one with there's the spinning one in Sword and Shield.
I remember hearing about that, but I didn't get that one.
Alchemy, I think?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah. The Alchemy one is weird because it's like different ways of, like different flavors you could get through different ways of spinning.
Yeah.
So there's some weird stuff with that.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting now because, like, I mean, something I sort of wanted to touch on is, like, where the online Pokemon community is today. And obviously, like, it's still, Cerebi's still around. They're still updating. Like, there's still, like, a huge, like, center and, like, important source of knowledge. But it is interesting to see, like, other popular platforms like Twitter and TikTok, like, for knowledge to sort of spread, like, more like disparately, almost like less like in a less centralized way. So like as a kid, I would definitely get like an evolution knowledge like that from Cerebi. But then this time around, I was just like, whatever, scrolling on TikTok and it's like, oh, this is how you evolve this Pokemon. I was like, wait, no way. And then of course I went and did it. And so like it is, I kind of do wonder like, with also the like the growing prevalence of like game guides on like official gaming websites, like obviously I'm sure Pokemon community still holds, Cerebi in like very high regards, but I imagine it would like be hard to compete with like literally all the other places that you could get information these days.
And we're not even, we're not even touching on the like competitive Pokemon scene sites like Smogon and that sort of thing, which is a whole other level of this stuff. We're mostly talking about like playing through the game and the sort of guidebook or field guide or whatever that you need for just playing and enjoying the game itself. But then there is this whole, second or even third tier where it's sort of the main game itself is not even, I mean, it's just sort of like the means to the end.
Yeah.
Which is the competitive scene.
Oh, yeah.
And the communities around that are something else entirely.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because, like, I was a kid and I just, like, would check the Pokemon of the day on Cerebi, and, like, they'd include, you know, like, fan art, sprite art, appearances in the anime, but then they would talk about, like, okay, here's how you can use this Pokemon most effectively in a battle. And so I was like, whoa, what? Like, you know, this whole idea of, like, training the EVs, the effort values, like the unseen stats of your Pokemon, for those who aren't familiar. It's, you know, like the IVs, like all this, like, Pokerus. Oh my gosh, like such a good, like, learning about that was so cool. Like, I learned about that from Cerebi, but then eventually really, like, where I dove deep was in Smogon, because it sort of is like that, like, bedrock of the competitive Pokemon community.
And to really, like, understand how each Pokemon works and is balanced and fits into the game. You know, Cerebi's a really good source for just knowing, like, you know, the hows and the whats, like, when does it evolve and what moves can it learn and that sort of thing. And then, and then Smogon is where you go to learn, like, okay, but how would you use this to, like, its maximum effectiveness? Yeah. And that was always really interesting. I mean, when I discovered that was a thing that people were doing, because I think everyone, you know, when you first start playing Pokemon, you just do battle your friends, and it's just kind of whatever you have. Maybe you have some friends who are a little bit more patient and don't have, like, just the Pidgeot and the things you get in the first few hours of the game evolved all the way. Like, that comprises most people's normal teams at first. And then you have some more patient friends who, like, will get something later in the game and train it all the way up. Anyone who had a Gyarados back in the day, right? But, you know, you're just sort of, like, throwing moves at each other until you see this other world of competitive Pokemon where even if one of you has even a basic understanding of how the competitive works and the other person doesn't, you'll wipe the floor with them. Yeah. And so the first time I've never been good at competitive Pokemon. Like, I've never committed that much time to it. But the first time that I did started committing time to it, it was like a whole eye-opening experience where you're like, oh my gosh, I can beat all of my friends now. This is incredible. Okay, so this is like a tiny confession. I made like a little bit of a career on Tumblr by just like relaying Smogon information, because like on Tumblr, there was like a lot of people who were in like that transition phase where they were like starting to play more, like they really maybe were like more invested in like the fan art side of like the fandom. But then we're spending a lot of time playing these games, and they're like, oh, there's all this other stuff. And so like, I would just sort of like relay information that I learned from Smogon onto Tumblr, and people would be like, whoa. I mean, Smogon might not like hearing that, because I was like 13 and like wasn't the best at crediting all of the time. But it's true. I mean, there, like, you touched on another thing, which is fan art and stuff. I mean, the Pokemon community splinters into so many different directions, and they, like, a lot of times barely acknowledge each other, or they'll just kind of dip their toes into the other factions, you know? So you have people who mostly just play the normal game and make fan art. You have a bunch of like terminology that comes out of these Pokemon communities that are just incomprehensible to someone who, even people who have played the game, like who've played Red or Blue or something. If you start talking about things like, oh, Pokefusions, or you know, it's all of these different things that sort of splintered off into, which is, I mean, a testament to just how huge this thing is, right? Like, it's gone so much bigger than just the game, and even just the game and the competitive, which is where a lot of things stop, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's just like, we are at a point where it's like, with all these new additions of like new mechanics, like new attacks, new types, new Pokemon, like new breeding systems, like all these systems within the world of Pokemon, like have become so complex that it's like, it's able to like house all these different interests like very neatly and very well. Did you ever play Pokemon Showdown, or did you ever use that as a tool?
Yeah, because for a little while I wanted to play Pokemon competitively, and it takes more work than I think a lot of people are willing to put in, myself included. So I definitely did use Pokemon Showdown to sort of like test teams and making a really good Pokemon team legitimately. It's not nearly as hard as it used to be, because now there's like actual ways to train your EVs without just fighting the exact right Pokemon. But, back especially like even 3 or 4 generations ago, it was like, well, I'm not going to go through all of that work. I'm just going to test it out here, because that's a whole heck of a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, and I remember like I would have the stamina for like one Pokemon. So I remember when I got like my perfect Garchomp with like its perfect IV set and its perfect I'm blanking. It's like its attitude or its demeanor that impacts like
its nature.
Its nature. Yep, exactly. And then I trained that, and I was like, okay, I can only like fight Zigzagoon because that gives me the attack EV. And just to catch people up, like IV is the individual value. It's like the inherited traits of your Pokemon. It like, I don't like, and this is the wild thing, is like, this is something that thanks to like Smogon, like I grew up knowing, is that like Pokemon inherently have like some inherent strength to them, that it's not like every Garchomp is the same, or, like every Pikachu is the same. And like I was lucky to know that because of Pokemon, but then people would be like, okay, why were you able to like wipe the floor with your Excadrill? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just special. But like I felt like I had this insider knowledge almost, thanks to like all these great resources. And then alongside of that, I mean, I was really lucky to grow up like watching really fun YouTubers who explain things really well. And I think actually like that was a big like learning process for me. And I feel like is much more common these days is like kids will watch, Rocket League to learn how to play that game or how to think about that game, how to strategize. But like, I remember watching Shofu, for example, who's like still battling today, competitive in like, one of the Smogon tiers of Pokemon. And like all of these just like sort of communities were so interactive, too, with each other, which was cool.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think what makes all of this so interesting is just that I think a lot of times people don't understand how much bigger games are than just the games themselves. And Pokemon is such a good example of it because it's so huge. I mean, just this morning I was looking on the Pokemon Reddit. There's a list of all, related Pokemon subreddits, and I was just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I'm like, holy crap, there's like 100 plus Pokemon subreddits. Yeah. And so to like talk about Pokemon and not talk about any of that is, I mean, you're just not getting the whole picture of the game. Like the game is just one facet of this enormous cultural thing that's wrapped up like millions and millions of people. And, obviously we're past like Pokemania or whatever in the late 90s and early 2000s, but that the internet has only made this like bigger and more persistent throughout the years is just really interesting. And I think a lot of video games are kind of trending that direction where it's not, the game is only part of the story. Yeah. People play the game, but that's like just one part of it. There's, thousands of Discord communities and thousands of websites and YouTubers and all of this stuff. And all of that stuff combined is like the story of that game.
Yeah. Well, and, like, it reminds me, like, I was thinking about today, I took some time and I was thinking, like, okay, where is, like, the online Pokemon community today? And it's just, like, Pokemon Go is just so ginormous. And it's just, like, it's brought in, like, so many new people. And these people know this game, like, very intimately. I wrote a story on like the Pokemon Go in the Mall of America community specifically. It's like awesome. Like a very specific story about how like all these people come to the Mall of America and they don't shop, and it's like flooded with people and none of them have been shopping, and it's just like wild, and like stores will like try to appeal to them. It's like changed the whole culture of the mall. And so it's also on this other end where it's like this online community, right? And these people are like making friends with each other IRL, and like there are Discord servers based on neighborhoods, but then like it is also like changing like almost like these physical like life, like by, you know, in that example, like by changing like mall culture, for example. And so it is just like, yeah, like you're saying, it's like so big to encompass. It's almost more like, you know, like a Disney or something. Cause it's like,
right.
Yeah.
Like if you try to, I mean, you know, we're keeping this to like an hour or whatever today, which means we have to keep it extremely high level.
Yeah.
But to ask, like, what does the online Pokemon community look like right now? It's like, I can't even answer that in an hour. Because which part, you know? Yeah. Like, it's that massive and has that many different, like, splinters and umbrellas that each of these cover that you can't talk about all of it. And especially if you start looping in all of the spin-off games, the Pokemon Go's, the mystery dungeons, the other mobile games. And, I mean, there's so much now that you can't even quantify it.
Yeah. Well, and it's just getting me like, oh man, because, you know, like I was talking to Ben and it's just like, well, you know, you could do so much content just on like online games, right? But like, again, you could do like an entire community and show just dedicated to like Pokemon communities. And like those do exist, right? There's It's Super Effective, or, you know, PKMN Pokemon podcast. And they're sort of like, they fill that void a lot. And I have to give them a shout out because they're Midwest based. And they're great. But like they have, you know, I don't know how long their show is, but it can get pretty long, like an hour to 2.5 hours every week, like only Pokemon news, like just Pokemon. And so like, that's like the level that you can get into. And that's like really, you know, there is almost like no bottom, which is crazy to think because like it was made by people. Let's see here. I Am Leafeon says the flexibility of the series being able to cater to extremely hardcore and extremely casual is insane. Completely agree.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's made this so, you know, I think most people respect Pokemon in general as like, this is an actual video game. You're not like, you know, there's a lot of gatekeepers in the gaming world, right? And I don't think there's a ton of people who, I'm sure there's some, but I don't think there's a ton of people who are like, Pokemon's not a real game. Yeah. Because there's just so much to it. There's so many levels to it. And you might say maybe Pokemon Go's not a real game or something. It is. But, you know, someone might be able to argue that, but you can't argue that this entire series isn't a real game or a real game experience because there's just so much of it. And I think for games that, you know, Pokemon originally found its audience with mostly younger kids and still has a young kid, like, there's a lot of young kids into it. It's one of the few games that's like really found the respect and giant community that encompasses all ages, as opposed to other games that, you know, as opposed to things like Roblox or even Minecraft sometimes gets shoehorned into just like that's a kid's game type thing. But Pokemon is so huge that like you can be on a serious gaming podcast or whatever and be talking about it. Yeah.
And for those of you concerned, like this is a capital G gamer podcast. We will not be getting our gamer cards revoked today. Yeah, it's, you know, it's interesting what you say about like it appealing to a wide audience. Cause like, even I remember like I talked about this a little bit last week with Petrana. It was like an episode on like Disney and internet cultures around like Disney fandoms and animation fandoms. And like one thing that came up was like the Disney adult and like the stigma behind that. But I'd like to remind people there used to be like a thing, like I feel like circa 2017, like the Poke adult, whereas like the Pokemon adult, you know, like the adult playing Pokemon. And I think we're sort of beyond that now because you see so many people of like all ages playing like Pokemon Go has just been such a, like a, I don't know, like a rule breaker as far as like who can and can't play games.
I mean, once all the parents started getting involved, and I mean like my parents, because we grew up in the age where we were Pokemon kids. Yeah. And of course our parents at the time were like, this is a fad, blah, 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 this is whatever. And then like, I don't know about your parents, but then my parents started playing Pokemon Go, you know? So it's like, it really has, it's jumped even like further generations than it maybe should have. Because it's one thing to be like, okay, you grew up with it and you still like it. It's another thing to be like, you grew up with it, your parents didn't, and now your parents even like it too. You know, it's brought in like the older generation.
Yeah. Well, and it was really sweet because like that reminds me of this family that I spoke to for this story. This was like one of my favorite stories I've ever reported because I just walked around the mall and just went up to strangers and was like, hey, are you playing Pokemon? You look like you're playing Pokemon.
That's awesome.
Can I talk to you? 10 out of 10 would recommend. Friendliest community ever. But I spoke to this family and like the mom was basically just like, you know, I asked them their ages because my editor didn't believe me that adults played Pokemon. And she, you know, she was 57, this mom was, and like they had it was like the parents and then the kids, and they were just like talking to me about how like, oh yeah, you know, like it's been so sweet because in Minnesota it's really cold in the winter, and so this is our opportunity to like get out and do something as a family. And like now like I'm more into it than my son. Like the mom ended up, you know, like started doing it like for her son, but then is like now more intense and like a higher level and has like more, you know, filled out Pokedex than him.
And I've heard that story so many times too, which is just awesome. That like, you know, maybe it took Pokemon Go maybe to be like the gateway for some of the older crowd, but they're totally into it now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Bob Bagara says Sylph Road and Mapped Discord groups are a great way to find your local groups. And yeah, I mean, it's I'm just like part of like the South Minneapolis one, and like it's just so nice and just so wholesome and so cool to see something that's like online but then like also physical. And that's what I think is something really special about like the Pokemon Go community specifically, and really unique. Yeah. I'm just gonna scroll through some notes here. Let's see here. Yeah, just people just sort of reaffirming that all ages they see playing Pokemon Go. I think something that's interesting too now is like with online communities, like we were talking earlier about how it can sort of cater to like these various levels of interest and expertise, and you can sort of get into it as much as you want to, but you're not shamed if you just like play Pokemon on sort of like a quote unquote like shallow level, which I even hesitate to use that word because it's like if you beat a Pokemon game that requires a lot of time, like that's not very shallow.
Yeah, you're still playing the whole game, and that is like a funny thing with a game like Pokemon where it's like going through and beating an entire video game is considered like just the bare minimum like shallow level interaction with this game, and that's pretty unique. I think.
Well, and it was wild too, because like it's been fun to see. Like I think Pokemon online community, like websites like Smogon, like websites like Cerebi, do make it like a really welcoming place for in-betweeners. So I feel like folks like you or me who are just like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about this. Like I'm not going to become like a state competitive, you know, or country, you know, world champion, whatever. But like if you want to learn how to get some like stronger Pokemon or like up your game a little bit, it's like totally okay with that. And even I was noticing with like Sword and Shield, the online community was really facilitating shiny hunting. And I think this is probably because like sharing footage on Twitter has never been easier, right? So people want like the flashiest thing. So like I feel like there is an uptick in shiny hunting and like sharing all the strategies behind that, like, but still on these like same websites. So
yeah, I mean, that shiny hunting, I feel like, is its own category of playing Pokemon, especially on Twitch and that sort of thing. I mean, I did some Twitch streams that were just shiny hunting because that's again, it's like its own separate way of interacting with the game, and there's communities based around just that one part.
Yeah. Or another example of fun, like you remind me too, just like, you know, specialized gameplay. There's the Nuzlocke community where it's like that always was interesting to me because like speedrunning is very intimidating. I don't think I could ever get into it. It looks so technical and so hard. I don't even know where I'd start. But Nuzlocke, like the rules are pretty simple. And even though it would be hard, I at least understand how to do it, you know?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and that even, like, I alluded to my own challenges I put on myself with the game sometimes, but yeah, like, the community itself invents these challenges, and then there's entire communities based just around that one challenge. And, you know, I don't even know how to quantify how many like Pokemon Discords there are. There's probably literally tens of thousands of them at this point.
Yeah.
But there's probably, I mean, there's Pokemon Discords for very specific, you know, narrow things like that, like just for talking about your Nuzlocke challenge.
Yeah. Well, and it is just fun too, like, I don't know. It just makes me so excited, like, as a writer, like, oh, like, what is out there, you know, that people are doing that we haven't seen? Like, with Sword and Shield, I saw a group of streamers come together and build their own challenge where they're like, okay, we're going to spend X amount of time in the wild area, catch as many as we can, Pokemon as we can, and then battle. And so, like, there are these very specific rules. They're streaming it out over the course of, you know, like an evening, and everyone gets to see everyone's stream, and it's, like, very competitive. And I was like, whoa, like, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool the way people have, like, you know, the inventiveness that these communities spawn, because Pokemon itself, you know, it's changed quite a bit over the years, but the formula is mostly the same. So people start getting kind of creative with like how they interact with this game.
Yeah. So Drew WX asks, did I miss the shipping fan fiction discussion? You know, I didn't read Pokemon fanfic. I'm sure it's there because it's there for everything. There's
a lot of like Pokemon roleplay too. Like I never was much into the fan fiction stuff specifically, but I mean, there's tons of it, and B, there's also huge like Pokemon role-playing communities as well, where the text-based role plays online and on forums, and they're probably just like over Discord now. I don't know how that's evolved, but
yeah. With COVID, I'm kind of curious to see like how COVID impacts some of these communities. I mean, Pokemon Go obviously would be like the largest example because the rest are online, and so they should be able to continue as usual. But with others, like, you know,
yeah. Actually, that does remind me. One of my favorite events is Magfest in National Harbor, and I think one of the things that they had the last couple years was like a Pokemon LARP, like live action roleplay thing. So people would come in Pokemon cosplay and do like the live action role playing, which is just again like that Pokemon is this old and people are still doing this, and you know, to attend Magfest, you're probably an adult, like that's. Or maybe a teenager, but you know, like,
but like that age range, you know. I haven't heard of Magfest. Where does it take place? Wait, you said
it's in National Harbor, which is basically DC.
Oh, okay. So then I bet
it's amazing.
Do people come from all over the country to go to something?
Yeah,
like that?
Yeah. And it's There's some fans in chat, and actually Obscuratory is one of the people who helps run some of the panel tracks there. So it's a really great convention, or I think they try to not call it a convention on purpose. But
coming together.
Yeah, but it's just a huge. It all takes place in the Gaylord Hotel in National Harbor, which I don't know if you've ever been to a Gaylord, but it's basically just like. It's a giant circle of rooms, and then in the middle is just tons and tons of there's like shops and like a little river running through it, and giant ballrooms and everything, and so everyone just stays in the same hotel.
That sounds amazing.
And the entire place is a party. It's awesome.
That sounds amazing. I'm like still learning about all these conventions and like everything that happens, because it's just like so large that there isn't. Again, like, I know this is like a theme and then sort of like broken record, but like there is no bottom to sort of any of this.
Bad year to discover it though, because I mean, I'm sure there's like no conventions at all time, but.
Yeah, I've always been bummed. I was actually before this, I was watching Ben's video on covering like Pokemon Worlds. And like, that's always been something I've wanted to go to, because like, again, it's just like, it seems like it is intergenerational. Like it's one of the only competitive tournaments where you have like specific age brackets, right? And you just like have all these ages and just like very wholesome community. And like, ever since I was a kid, like it was my dream to go to like Pokemon worlds. I'm sure I'll be able to get to one eventually.
And those competitions have been running for so long, you know, I mean, like, it goes back to the coverage I remember reading in, like, Nintendo Power and stuff as a kid. You know, it's Pokemon competitive scene has, I mean, it's evolved obviously a ton, but, like, it's just kind of always been there and is still there now, this many years later, which is just, you know, 25-ish years later. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like, I mean, this brings up like another point is that with Pokemon specifically, I think that, you know, like Pokemon Company and Nintendo have had like an appropriate sort of like level of distance from like the fan community, where it's like in Smash Brothers, there's always been sort of like this weird strained relationship where it's like, okay, you know, like there aren't very good like Nintendo sponsored Smash tournaments. Like there isn't a giant community there, and it's like largely driven by like the like fighter game community. But then with like Pokemon, there are these really big like quote unquote like official events put on by Pokemon Nintendo, and like it's not like they're facilitating that whole thing, like, you know, it's still very community driven by websites like Smogon, but it is like a nice sort of like, you know, relationship where it's not too overbearing but also like not giving the community nothing.
Yeah, I think healthy is a really good way to describe it, because I mean, you have to give the fans room to breathe and create and have their own community that's not kind of under like this really close watchful eye of the parent company, but you also have to provide some structure, because it's otherwise it just feels like they don't care about the community or the fans, right?
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, with the exception of, I feel like the only real, I hate to bring this up, but like the only real major Pokemon event flub was like the first Pokemon Go Fest, because it literally didn't work. Like it was in Chicago, and I think the cell towers could not take it, and but the more recent ones have been great, and now I guess it's canceled. Well, it's gone online. But it's not in Chicago this year. But it seems like Pokemon's always sort of like played that balance really nicely. I'm trying to think, is there any other websites that you'd like to talk about? We've talked about Cerebi, we've talked about Smogon. I feel like I'm rushing and sort of like I should just like slow down and talk a little slower. But I am just sort of realizing like we're at the end of the hour and it feels like we've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, and I think just like I mentioned earlier, limiting this to an hour is just like, that's just sort of how you have to talk about it instead of really high level. And those are two of the biggest sites. I mean, there's Bulbapedia, which serves a very similar purpose to Cerebi. And I think, does Cerebi have an app? I think Bulbapedia has an app, and I don't know if Cerebi does too. But
that's a good question.
But also, everyone has like the internet in their pocket, so I mean, I usually just go to these websites anyway. There's just a ridiculous amount of forum sites, and try to list them all would be ridiculous, but I mean, I think those are sort of like the big pillars of it. And if we start getting any nitty-grittier, I'm going to feel bad about leaving out all the others.
Yeah, right.
Hundreds of ones.
Right? Yeah, like all the just like all the smaller, you know, just like everything we haven't talked about. But I sort of like, I guess one other thing that is interesting to note about online Pokemon communities is like I'm thinking about like guides and like my go-to resources. And so oftentimes for like so many of the franchises these days, like it is like, you know, IGN or, you know, whatever guide's website. But like Pokemon, you can still go to Pokemon community run websites. And I think that's really nice and beautiful. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's going to be like, I don't know, 100 years from now when people are looking back at Pokemon, I hope that they also are looking back at all of these websites to really like understand just how enormous this. I'm always looking at things from a historian perspective, which is maybe not everyone's perspective, but to look back at all of these websites and be like, you know, this is Pokemon. It's not to pick up and play a copy of Pokemon is nothing compared to being able to look at all of these other websites.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, I mean, we were talking about this, but like I'll expand on this, like for the chat, like just the two of us were talking about like how the Video Game History Foundation like has an emphasis on preserving, like, for example, like the materials around games and not necessarily the games themselves. And I think Pokemon is just like such a great example of like why that should be the case and why that work needs to happen. Because like literally, I mean, it's just like to reiterate what you said, like you are not getting Pokemon unless you are getting like all these other pieces of it.
Pokemon was on the cover of Time magazine.
Which year?
Like,
I mean, that's like which Pokemon do you know? Was it like Pikachu?
Well, it had like a Poliwhirl and a Pikachu, and I can't remember exactly, but it was. I mean, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Is like how Pokemon was on the cover of Time magazine. Like, how many games can say that, right?
Person of the year.
So you know you can't understand Pokemon even a little bit without understanding this bigger context that it's in, without understanding the Pokemania, without understanding that there was a town in Kansas that renamed themselves from Topeka to Topekachu.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, as a publicity stunt. But
yeah.
they changed their name back after that.
That's unfortunate. I was about to move there.
Right?
Yeah. Just start.
But that's the kind of thing that, not every game has, but that Pokemon especially, like, understanding this greater community and context around it is so important to understanding what Pokemon is.
Yeah. Well, and just like, I don't know, like, one final point is it's just wild to me too to like see the community continue to grow with Pokemon Go, because you think like once you have a town fake named after you, like there's nowhere to go but down, but like they continue like to surprise me with like who they appeal to and who like they bring into the fold. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I think the Pokemon Go mania was it's hard to quantify exactly, but it seems like it was as big as the Pokemania of the late 90s and early 2000s. It seemed very, very similar in terms of just who was talking about it. I mean, all the local news stations were talking about it. It was on CNN, and all of the, like, people were talking about Pokemon everywhere. And it's really, really abnormal for a series to have that much staying power and to make that many headlines a second time, like 20 plus years later. Yeah.
Well, before we tie up, what do you think is going to be the third iteration of the Pokemon Go fever? Is it going to be, so we have Pokemania, Pokemon Go. This is just like sort of like,
is there like a
what's going to be the what's going to be the future live Pokemon? What's going to be the next thing to make headlines?
Yeah, I think you'd have to do something like, because Pokemon Go works so well because it's sort of, it almost fulfills that fantasy of like Pokemon being real, right? So I think the next one would have to just be like a step closer to that. Like you would have to be able to buy like a fake pet that actually functions like a Pokemon or something like that. I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
Who knows what's possible in the future? I think that the closer we get to like a quote unquote real Pokemon world, that could spark up again, right?
Well, folks, you heard it here first. When it becomes real news, you can refresh and say, hey.
Yeah, when Pokemon are real.
Yeah.
It was me that called it.
Yeah, you were the first person. Well, okay, thank you so much for coming on to talk with me today. This episode was slightly different. It was just sort of like the two of us like sharing something that like we both care about and we've both been involved with, but still like very online with the theme of the show. And for me, I mean, it's like especially exciting. I like all internet culture, but I think like the most interesting, my favorite things is like the intersection between video games and internet culture. So before we wrap up, I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. MinMax would not be able to exist if it weren't for your support. We'd not be able to branch out and explore new topics like internet cultures in video games if it weren't for y'all. So thank you so, so, so much. And a quick plug, if you have not heard or seen, we have revamped our $10 tier on Patreon. So it's our new backstage pass. You can see all kinds of fun stuff, essentially like unedited versions of all our content. Like the edit, you can actually be streamed into the editing process and just sort of like see how everything works. And with that, Kelsey, would you like to plug anything today before we say goodbye?
Sure. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Kelsey Lewin, or follow the Video Game History Foundation. We're at GameHistory.org, and we just launched a merch store like yesterday.
I saw that.
Support a good cause. You can buy some merchandise from our website. It's just GameHistory.org, and then there's a little button for the shop.
Amazing. Yeah, I was checking that out and I was like, ooh, like I can't decide if I want to get a mug because they're really cute or a shirt. I saw that
mugs have been popular.
Sarah Pods had the fantastic idea, the friend of the show, of making a t-shirt into a crop top.
Yeah.
So
I have some
that's
extras,
up your alley.
so I might actually do that myself.
You should. And then you can model and people can be like, okay, I want to buy it to do that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, folks. Thanks so much again for coming today. The video will be up. The recording will be up within the next couple of days. And if, you know, like you have any thoughts, feedback, or if you like this kind of stuff, just like let us know so that we can continue making content that y'all like and enjoy. Bye.
MinMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.